Hey everybody, and welcome back to Cooking Up Trouble. And I happen to be here with, I think we all know him from Wild Cards on Saving Throw Show. He was Gabriel Pryor in their first Weird West campaign. Joshua Sawyer, who I describe as a semi-neurotic media major on the Wild Cards ETU campaign, and is currently portraying Midas Buchanan on Wild Cards, the Nightlinger's Traveling Carnival of the Extraordinary. I'm here with Jordan Pridgen. Hey, Jordan.
Hey, how's it going? Nice to be here. I'm excited to talk about the deck and just talk Doomtown in general.
I'm excited about this too because I actually went up against this deck in the Name a Card league.
Yeah, and this is currently we are. I'm about to do the finals for the Ranger tournament because I am in the finals against Tiber Song and his gadgets. But this is the same deck that I played in the Ranger and the Name a Card tournament, which it made it to top 8, but it ended up getting beaten down at the end by Doomdog, but I've had some pretty good tournament results with this deck recently, so I'm looking forward to.
I would say so. This is like I've been looking forward to actually talking about this deck ever since you and I played in the Name a Card event, and good luck.
Thanks.
I'm rooting for you. So
I understand you have some split loyalties with your entrepreneurs are on the other side of things.
I know. But see, the thing is that he's all about his mechanical horses, and I prefer mine to be flesh and blood.
I can see how you're torn either way.
But anyway, yeah. So you're a writer and a comedian, and you star on the Saving Throw Show's Wild Cards. Awesome Savage World stream.
I like your description of a slightly neurotic journalism major, although I think it's just sort of a default that all my characters are slightly neurotic because I put a little of myself into them. And I'm just a little neurotic, so it all works out.
Like I'm sort of the same way when it comes to my characters as well. But coming to you from the past, and because by the time this goes up, the Ranger event may be over. Check them out. Twitch.tv, Saving Throw Show. Wild Cards goes live every Friday night at 8 p.m. Pacific.
Yep. And we are, I don't know how long this will be, but we are in the midst of our first season of our new campaign, as you already mentioned, the Nightlinger's Traveling Carnival of the Extraordinary. And, of course, you have a NPC who has shown up in some of our episodes so far.
Yes.
Our Ange the Calliope player.
He's like I said, he's sort of a little bits and pieces of my real life, where it's like being the tinkerer that I am in the real world, because I'm actually an electronics repair technician, and I also do sort of the music thing. You can check out my small catalog of music at bustedboot.bandcamp.com.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, you've got that. You did some music that we ended up using in the first campaign of Wild Cards, which was really fun.
Yeah, and you have no idea of how just my mind was blown whenever the other Jordan Case Callerman, asked me, he's like, "Hey, can I use this?" And I'm like, "Yes, sir."
Yeah, well, it worked perfectly. It was a great little piece to have in there.
And I've used that theme so many times since, because it's just a great little theme to build stuff off of. But anyway, let's talk about your deck. And the first question I'm going to ask is always, regardless of who the guest is your choice of home, and you went with House of Many Faiths.
So I'll be entirely honest. The reason I started using House of Many Faiths, I came into Doomtown a couple years back, and we had already talked about potentially, and me and JCC and Gaurav kind of got into it, and we had talked with Pinebox about potentially putting our characters into the game, especially since we had art for them and everything.
Yeah.
And I was told that Gabe would probably be an anarchist blessed. And so I was like, great, whatever the Anarchist Blessed House is, I'm going to play that. So I just made a deck knowing that would like potentially be the thing. But House of Many Faiths is honestly an enormously powerful home. Now that I've like learned a little bit more about it, it does everything. And it really is like the core of the deck. I feel like there are a lot of homes that add an ability that are useful, but aren't always necessarily like the build around of the entire thing. But House of Many Faiths is just, it's so versatile, and it's such an engine that it's hard to overstate how much it does. Now, I mean, right off the bat, it's a 19 Ghost Rock home, which, is on the higher end, and it has 3 production, which is pretty standard. But let's go over like this ability. It's a little complicated at first because it just does so much, but there's a lot of implications for like what it can do.
Yeah.
So it's Noon Boot. Choose your dude with a miracle and shuffle a card from your hand and a card from your discard pile into your deck. That dude moves to town square, unboots, and gets +1 influence.
Well, +1 influence means right there that can stop you losing the game.
Absolutely, and it does all the time. I mean, it's basically lets me start this deck with 5 influence, which 4 is sort of the key number that most people try and hit in a starting posse to feel safe. The fact that this lets me just like get that 1 extra can really make a difference. It's also, I would say, what really kind of puts it over the top for me, besides the 1 influence, because the deck has a lot of other ways to generate influence, is the fact that it unboots a dude. Like, it just kind of adds, like, the mobility this adds to your deck is super key. And I kind of built this entire deck around having really solid mobility, which is a common anarchist theme. But this just,
I remember
No, go on.
But when the original home for the anarchists, the 108 Righteous Bandits, it was almost a parallel to the old card games Mage Rats, where you could use the home ability just to move a dude, just period, just move a dude.
Yeah, and this is a little less versatile in how it can move the dude, but it still gives you that mobility. It unboots a dude. It gives you, everything else that's tacked onto it just makes it fantastic. And I also being able to get a card out of your hand. I mean, this is, discard a card in a lot of card games feels like a bad thing, but being able to take a card from, but in Doomtown, being able to discard cards, get them out of your hand is really like card draw, because it helps you make sure you only have what you really need.
This isn't like Magic the Gathering, where if you discard something, you're not getting it back unless you have some other card to provide recursion. No,
and in fact, this is even better. Because this puts it into your deck, so you can make sure that cards that you made it into your discard but didn't make it into your hand, they get right back into your deck. So, I mean, I use it a lot of the time. Like, the ideal way to use it is to just make sure that the jokers are always in your deck. And, instead of them sitting in your discard pile uselessly, if you get to the point where you have, 10 cards in your deck and a joker in your discard, or even in the perfect world, a joker in your hand and a joker in your discard, you can put both of those jokers back into your deck and then just have a really, really powerful shootout turn waiting for you. But even just when it's not jokers, being able to put unprepareds back in the deck, being able to put any key pieces it's just hugely powerful.
Another thing that I'm liking about this whole entire movement effect is that this effect will literally move one of your dudes from anywhere to town square. So if one of your guys gets in a bad spot, say at an out-of-town dude,
absolutely
out-of-town deed somewhere, you can actually pull him back and then have some reinforcements waiting in town square.
Yeah, and that happens all the time. Like, just being able to kite someone around town a little bit, and your dude ends up booted somewhere that's not perfect, but other people have to move there to try and do something about it. You know that when they bring their Stephen Wiles in to kill your booted blessed somewhere, you can pull him home safe and sound, and it's
before before Steven even has a chance to call them out.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the one downside to that is it can only move them to town square. So the deck can have a little trouble if the opponent has a really strong hold on town square.
Yeah.
Just because if you are unbooting your Blessed and moving them to town square, and then you have to run home immediately because you're being called out, it just takes a lot of the advantage away. You still get the influence, which is amazing.
It's sort of the flip side of the coin that I'm playing with the Morgan Regulators deck, where I get to move a dude to town square.
Yep.
They become a stud.
And make them a stud.
And if they have a horse, unboot them. So my regulators are a little bit more conditional because I have to have a horse attached to one of the dudes. But that's only to unboot them. They still move to town square and still become a stud.
Sure. Well, and it's worth and that, I mean, the upside to that is that when you have a stud, and I know how Morgan Regulator decks work, like you can have, your Henry Morans, your cards that are high-powered draws, and they become your main shooters. This doesn't have...
Go on. A really good example. Sorry to interrupt.
No, go on.
I was actually talking to Carter today about it, and was including Dead Billy Jones, who's a 3-draw, but because of the Morgan Regulators home, I can move him to town square, and then he becomes a 3-stud, and that's dangerous.
It's game changing. A 3-stud is enough to make any shootout worth having, honestly. This doesn't provide shootability with it when it comes to town square. And you mentioned the horses thing. I also think that it's super important to note that this home doesn't do anything until you have a miracle on the board.
Yep.
Which is why, and this is a relatively new addition to the deck that I changed after talking to David Lapp at Genghis Khan this year, and he suggested it, and Prodigy was doing this same thing with his Dead Man's Hand version of a House of Many Face deck, but I added Ezekiah Grime. I don't know. Yeah, Grim. Yeah. I added him to the deck because he just helps you turn the engine on. So if you don't draw your miracles in your first 5 hands, in your first 5 cards that you drew, you can have a really tough time getting the deck flowing like it's supposed to. And when it gets to the point where you can actually look at the first 10 cards of your deck with Grim, which is basically the case, that problem goes away almost entirely. Not to mention, as the deck goes on, now, like, for the most part, I tend to use Grim just to get the engine going. But you also have the ability later on, when you get to the point where you're down to 5 to 10 cards left in your deck, and you really know what those cards are because you've gotten rid of everything else is in the discard.
Oh, yeah.
You can use House of Many Faiths to take a specific miracle that you want on the board from your discard pile or your hand, put them into the deck, and then when you use Grim's ability to reveal the top 5 cards of the deck and put one onto the dude you've booted, you have an almost guaranteed hit. So that's really useful. Like, this deck has 2 copies of Consecration in it, and in general, I feel like I only ever really want 1 on the board, but Grim really helps to make sure that I get at least 1 of whatever my key miracles are onto the dudes really effectively and quickly, which is nice.
Right. Now, Grim being a legend does dock you a single starting wealth, which is probably one of the bigger reasons why using House of Many Faiths in its 19 starting Ghost Rock is it's a big deal.
And I'll be honest, I mean, with the starting posse I have now, I know we're going to talk about that afterwards, I'm down to only 1 Ghost Rock after with Grim on the board, so it's not a nothing cost to have that -1 Ghost Rock, and economy can be a little difficult in this deck, but the utility that he brings to things and the consistency with which he helps to turn on the home, it just makes it worth it.
Well, I mean, coming from Magic the Gathering myself, it's like whenever you cast a spell that looks at the top 5 cards of your deck, and then you put something that you desperately need into your hand,
Yeah.
I can't think of a single MTG player who's going to argue with something like that.
No, it's extremely powerful, and there aren't that many effects that do things like that in this game, especially, and so part of the other upside of it is if you use Grim, you have to boot the Blessed, which is a downside, obviously. But if you find a miracle and manage to attach it to them, you can use House of Many Faiths to unboot that Blessed again.
Mm-hmm.
So it really helps mitigate the cost. It really synergizes well with the home. It's been a huge improvement in the power of the deck.
To parallel that with my own Morgan Regulators deck,
Mm-hmm.
Hezekiah is sort of your Maggie Harris.
Exactly. Like, Maggie just makes sure that you get a horse onto your people on the first turn or even every turn, depending on, how often you need to use her. And Grim does the same thing. He's just really key to getting the plan going.
All right. Well, let's talk about your starting dudes. It's like why? It's like it's like anarchists get special because they actually have a dude that can bend the rules as far as how many dudes you get to start with, and that's Zhao Dan Li.
And Zhao Dan Li is frankly so good that I almost can never imagine making an anarchist posse and not putting him in.
I don't see why you wouldn't. He's only one Ghost Rock, and sure, he's a one-draw dude. Guess what? That's a cheap casualty.
Not to mention, especially in this deck, if you look at the rest of my starting posse, nobody has bullets. There are 2 0 studs and 3 0 draws amongst the other players or the other people in the posse. And just having one person who is a 1 draw it makes it's a huge difference. He tends to be my most common shooter early on. He is very losable in shootouts. Like, if you have to discard or ace Zhao Dan Li, that's fine. You just don't care that much. He also, like, if you have a way to raise bullets, he tends to be one of the best targets for it, because even though when you are low on stud, having some draw isn't that great. When you're high on stud, it's just like having more draw.
Yeah.
And if you can get together like 7 or 8 total cards that you're drawing, and then you have 2 or 3 stud with it, you can put together pretty much whatever hand you're trying to do most of the time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, obviously I say that, and then, you run into situations where you can't do anything with no matter how much draw you have, but Zhao Dan Li just, he checks all the boxes. He's super useful. I could never imagine going without him.
I think the term in the business is cost efficient.
Yes, exactly.
Now, I see another fairly obvious choice when it comes to anarchist in your starting lineup, and that's Randall.
Randall is, with no upkeep, costing only 4 and 2 influence.
Yeah.
Randall's not only just definitely has to be in the deck, but he's also the first guy that people try and get rid of. Randall has been kidnapped and mugged so many times in my games. I guess not mugged as much, but
kidnapped, ambushed.
People kidnap Randall all the time. And obviously his trait is enormously important. While Randall is a location with 2 or more other dudes, your maximum hand size is increased by 1.
I'll go ahead and jump in here and say to make a note. This doesn't affect your starting hand.
No, it doesn't. Because Randall is not officially on the board when. Yeah, you don't deal with his trait until after that first hand. But every day after the first one, it makes you draw up to 6 cards, which is a huge difference. The extra card from Randall has been the difference between life and death so many times. He's just amazingly costed. He's another one that every time I've made another anarchist starting posse, I'm just well, I've got to have Randall. He's just too good. And he definitely is.
And I love how, thematically, he's pretty much a storyteller. He just tells stories.
He sits around the fire and he makes everybody have a good old time. Now, the Tombstone Haint, the next guy in the list, is the most recent addition to my starting posse. And he is honestly a game changer. Talking about efficiency, the Tombstone Haint has everything that an Anarchist deck needs to. Now, I know we haven't gone into the Blesseds in my deck, which are really key to this deck specifically.
Right.
But the Tombstone Haint sort of feels like he is a good addition to basically any Anarchist starting posse that has the room for him.
I think I remember a play that you did in our game where, simply because the Tombstone Haint's trait is that he has +2 influence during the upkeep phase. What that means is that he can move to one of my deeds during upkeep, which is where production also happens.
Yeah.
Gets +2 influence, controls the deed during upkeep, and then prevents me from getting the production.
And that's huge. And honestly, so this is an Amazing Grace deck, and Amazing Grace, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit more.
Oh, yeah.
Gives all of your dudes an extra influence for the purpose of controlling locations during the day. But the downside, the upside to that is you can use it to end up getting to the win. You can take all these 0 influence dudes and you can turn them into control points to win the game. But the problem is that those 0 influence dudes, like Stevie, like Zhao Dan, they don't do anything to stop income, which is what you really want to sit dudes on. The Tombstone Haint does, and it just makes him really good. He also adds a stud to the posse, which, especially early on, 1 extra stud can be a whole world of difference.
Oh yeah.
And he only costs 2, and he has 0 upkeep. So the Haint is great.
I would include this card in any deck that uses 2s in the draw structure.
I completely agree. He's very easy to run.
Yeah. Let's start talking about your Blesseds.
Okay. Shilong Pang. So Shilong Pang is sort of the main shooter and tends to be the main Blessed of the deck. I'd say behind Randall, he's the one who ends up getting kidnapped the most. And he's pretty basic. He costs 5. He has 0 upkeep. And that's really why I run him in the deck, as a 0 upkeep, influence, stud, Blessed. Now, I'm of the opinion that even though the general starting dudes of Anarchists are really, really good, the Blessed starting dudes of Anarchists, or at least in the Shilong Pang slot, are a little inferior to Law Dog starting dudes. I mean, if you look at Padre Ernesto de Diaz, who is basically I think he's 0 stud, 1 influence for 4 and 0 upkeep, and has a relative ability. Shilong Pang, the downside to him, he does have Blessed 1, but his ability, his trait is pretty much useless in this deck. But honestly, just as I mentioned earlier, the deck doesn't have a lot of Ghost Rock starting off, so he's just essential because of the fact that he has 0 upkeep.
That's important because in my Morgan regulators, I'm always torn between either starting Jarrett Blake, who's 5 Ghost Rock, 1 upkeep for a 2 stud, 1 influence, and has a horse-related shootout ability, versus Buckin' Billy Ballard, who's 1 stud, 1 influence for 6 and 1. But as soon as he attaches a horse, he becomes a 2 and 2, which is pretty big.
Yeah.
And
I ran into. Oh yeah, go on.
And he actually can provide card draw by booting his horse.
So it's a big upside, but 1 upkeep is nothing to shake a stick at.
That, and then 1 extra Ghost Rock cost. So it's sometimes the difference between starting with 4 and starting with 3, which on paper may not look like a whole lot, but once you actually start playing the game and you realize, oh wait a minute, I could play this card in my hand if I only had 1 extra Ghost Rock.
So I had a pretty similar dilemma in this deck, and so I played a slightly different version of the deck for Gen Con for the Marshall tournament, and I did not do as well. And instead of Shilong Pang, I removed him from the deck and I put Master Shao in my starting posse. And Master Shao is still in the deck, but the upside to Master Shao is he has 1 more bullet. He costs 1 less to start out, and he also has an ability that is now relevant because there is an abomination in the starting posse. So he has the ability, to boot your abomination dude at this or an adjacent deed, and the deed's owner must pay you 1 ghost rock if able. So theoretically,
that's really good synergy.
Yeah, and theoretically, you could send him over to someone else's deed that you are, holding down, boot the Tombstone Haint, get a little extra ghost rock, and make up for the upkeep.
And then
that Master Channel
and then
costs.
On the next upkeep, deny your opponent his production from that deed. So
exactly, and in theory, it feels like a really strong play. It feels like a very strong thing to do. But what I found in practice is that starting with just 2 ghost rock and only 2 income is an enormous difference from starting with 3 income. And it could really hinder the deck in being able to build up, especially if you didn't get a turn 1 deed, or if you lose low ball, which the deck does a lot because it has a very strong draw structure.
Yeah, I'm looking at this here in my browser window. It's like, yeah, that's tight.
Yeah, I think it's like 16, 15, 12, maybe.
Let's look.
Maybe it's 11, actually, because Stevie actually starts in the
16,
first one.
15, 12.
Yeah.
Was technically 16, 15, 11.
11 because Stevie.
Yeah.
But it's very strong, and it shoots very well early on.
And speaking of Stevie, I'm actually not very familiar with him.
So Stevie he's a great little utility dude. He's sort of a bullet catcher with an upside. Like, I would call him a bullet catcher. I would say he's a bullet catcher, but honestly, I've had lots of games where Stevie ends up being sort of my main blessed, because a lot of people see a blessed deck and they realize that they can knock it out if they can get rid of Shilong Pang quickly. Because he tends to go out and get in fights, and he's a stud, so I want to be shooting with him. And he'll get pinned down or knocked out pretty easy, whereas Stevie Linden basically can early on sit at home. He's an easy target for Grim because you don't care that much if he's booted down at home. And he can load up things like Consecration, Amazing Grace, which he's useful in other decks because he can cast Amazing Grace on pretty much any pull with his +4 Blessed skill thing. It's not necessary in this deck because this deck doesn't usually fail pulls. The only thing that fails pulls in this deck is the Joker's Smile, which is in as a utility deed. And used to start, before I added the Tombstone Haint, I used to run Old Howard, and he would fetch the Joker's Smile to have it on the battlefield right at the beginning. Yeah. But I moved away from that.
Yeah, Joker's Smile is a pretty popular target for Old Howard.
Oh yeah,
which I don't know. Like I'll go ahead and touch on this because this is one.
Sure.
This is just makes me smile. I don't know if about you and how much you know about the original Doomtown collectible card game from the late '90s.
I don't know much. I know now. I have heard that Old Howard is like the ghost of a character who was in that, right?
Yeah, Old Howard is the ghost of Howard Finley, who was the pretty much the president, CEO of whatever kind of term you want to label him with, of Sweet Rock Mining Company's Western Branch, which was the biggest mining company operation that was in Gomorrah at the time.
Nice.
Was responsible for the creation of the Blackjacks gang as it was, but he actually winds up dying in the original storyline and comes back as a ghost. So the fact that he's printed as a dude who becomes a ghost that haunts the location that you fetch with him.
I love it. I think it's great.
Yeah, it is, as they say, fully packed with flavor.
The flavor in this game is out of this world most of the time. I love it. It's so much fun. Now, Stevie, he just sits on his porch and he plays his hymns, and he does a damn good job playing his hymns. And he's just an all-around good guy to have. He only costs 2, no upkeep to keep up the trend of just doing an entirely upkeepless thing, and he's a backup blessed.
Yeah, it's sort of like me starting Henry Moran. There's no reason why I shouldn't start Henry Moran in my horse deck because he's 1 Ghost Rock.
Yeah, and it's a huge plus.
Oh yeah.
So The final member of the starting posse is Asakichi Cook, and I would say she's a little less essential to the deck. Like, if I was going to flex and switch another character out, it would probably be Cook, but she is by no means bad. In fact, she's also another anarchist staple. So she has influence.
I'm already. Sorry. It just kind of dawned on me. It's like I can see this. Like how all this works. You discard a card with her. Move one of your other dudes from this location, meaning from home, to any other location. A good choice being the Tombstone Haint to one of my deeds, and then boot your blessed with Ezekiah Graham to practically tutor for a spell. Then use House of Many Faiths to unboot the blessed that you just got the spell for, and then shuffle the card that you discarded with Asakichi Cook back into your deck.
You have so much control over what's in your hand, what's in your deck, where people are. Cook is great because she gives you another discard outlet. I've never gotten to a situation where I can't almost entirely clear my hand out. The problem you run into in this deck tends to be that when you have a bunch of cards you don't want to lose in your hand, trying to pick ones to switch for House of Many Faiths or ones to discard for Asakichi Cook. You never end up in a problem that I've run into in a lot of other decks where you have too many cards in your hand and the works are gummed up. It just never happens because you can discard cards to Cook. You basically discard cards to the home, and you draw an extra card with Randall. So with discarding one at the end of turn, I'm usually drawing 5 new cards on the second day because I'm usually holding on to a Ricochet or something that's just important to have for a situational point at some point in the future. So Cook just really adds to the mobility theme. There's been a ton of times where Cook has been really important to that. She adds to the discard and card cycling theme, and she has influence. And that's never a bad thing. So there's a fun little trick that's in this deck that I've never really pulled off.
Okay.
But I still kind of want to, that she's also sort of essential to. So I have Doris Powell in the deck on 10.
Okay, let me look at her. Yeah.
And Doris Powell is, she costs 4 and has 2 upkeep, which makes her a little expensive, but she does have the 2 influence, but her ability is really interesting. So if she's ever at home, she loses all control points, but whenever she moves to an in-town deed without booting, she gains a control point to a maximum of 3.
So you can use Asakichi to scoot her over to an
in-town
deed and gain a control point that way.
If I have one Walk the Path out on one of my blesseds and 1 deed on the board, you can get her up to 3 control points on day 1. So if you move her to Town Square and then to a deed, that gets her 1. Then use Cook to move her back to Town Square. And this is assuming there's only 1 deed. If there's more deeds, it's super easy. But then if you use Cook to move her back to Town Square, she's still not booted, so she can move back to the place. Then she can boot to go back to Town Square, and then use the Blessed with Walk the Path, which can pull a dude to that Blessed's location, to pull her back to the deed to get all 3 of the control points. And there are decks and situations where just being able to put out 3 control points quickly like that can turn things completely south for them. Now, I've never won the game with Doris Powell, but there have been times where I have played Doris Powell out and people have realized that if they keep sitting where they are and they don't move out and take action, it will win them the game. So just all of that kind of working together is a really powerful little side combo to just have sitting in the deck.
Well, let's now talk about pretty much the overall strategy that the deck operates on. And you said earlier this is an Amazing Grace deck. So let's look at Amazing Grace.
So Amazing Grace is pretty much the best card in the deck, and it's one of the best miracles that's been printed. And it took me a little while of playing to realize exactly why that was. But let's go over what it does. So it's a new Miracle 6, which The pull basically never fails in this deck.
Especially not on Stevie.
Nope, not on Stevie. It succeeds by a great deal on him. And so this blessing gets +1 influence and does not go home booted the next time they refuse a call out. Your other dudes get +1 influences for purposes of controlling locations, and your dudes cannot have their influence reduced by opposing abilities. This is a lot.
Yeah.
The +1 influence, I usually have no problem getting to 7 or 8 influence in this deck by like getting an Amazing Grace out, even with just the starting posse out. Because you're raising things with House of Many Faiths, you tend to raise one or both of your blesseds with Amazing Grace. It's really powerful. The fact that it also turns all your other little duders, Xiao Dan Li, into actual controllers of places is enormous.
Oh yeah. Well, me coming from a more aggressive standpoint, because I'm running the Morgan regulators primarily, and that's only because of going through all 6 of the starter decks that's available from Pine Box Entertainment. It was the horse deck that actually I kind of was drawn to the most.
Well, horses are fun.
They are fun, but this first line, this blessing gets +1 influence and does not go home booted the next time they refuse a call out, meaning that if you're sitting on one of my deeds, you are able to control it better, and I can't move there and go, hey, I'm calling you out. You need to get off my my private deed or whatever.
Exactly.
And your blessed goes, no. Look, well then you need to leave. Nope, not going to do that either.
I mean, let's say you have the Circle M Ranch as an example, and I think, unless I'm misremembering the card, this is the one that if you have 3 or fewer cards in hand, you can boot it and draw a card.
That is exactly right.
If I have used Amazing Grace on my guy and I move him to the Circle M Ranch, and you already had a dude with, say, 0 influence there, or a dude with 1 influence, because if I'm using Amazing Grace, my Blessed's probably up to 2 influence.
At this point, yeah.
I move my guy there. And normally, you would be able to call him out, and I would have to deal with something before I'd be able to use the Circle M, but I could just say no. Boot the Circle M, get my card draw out of it, and then, if it's a card I like, I could accept the call out when you do it next turn, or I could just run on home and let that work there. It's also important because there'll be a lot of times, especially in the later stage of a Doomtown game, where there's just lots of deeds all over the place. And that's when your dudes with influence become so essential, because they're going around and letting you control the deeds, letting you get the advantage out of it. And when I can use Xiao Dan Li as something that's forcing you to chase my dudes around town and actually, defend your deeds, it's an entirely different game than when I can only do it with people who have on-card influence. And it definitely wins games. It can be huge. Not to mention, if you have 2 Amazing Graces or even 3 that have gone off in your game, like on the day, then Xiao Dan Li is moving around as a 3 influence dude, which is amazing. It's huge. It makes running cheap dudes like Henry Moran in the deck really, really useful. It just makes all bodies good.
Oh,
and not to mention,
it makes pretty much anybody who's on the table effective.
Yeah, exactly.
Like even your spuds are able to take locations over, and whenever you are able to take all of your opponent's deeds over, and you wind up with more control points than your opponent has influence, you win the game.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, there's an enormous amount of times that I've played games where it's come down to them having stronger shooters on the board, but they have 2 or 3 people with influence, often who are sitting home to be safe about things. And I have effectively 5 or 6 dudes who all have influence because of Amazing Grace. And I realize I don't have to shoot out anymore. I can just jump around to positions where I have enough control points to take them out until they move to stop it and pull everybody out of position. And it happens very often. Like, I would say that's one of the major win states of this game is get a big town and then control it better than other people. Now, the downside, of course, is that sometimes you play against decks the way they just don't play out many deeds. I I've seen it happen a lot recently, which is part of why I think the Master Shao interaction was not worth it in the starting posse.
Yeah, I can understand where you might come into a bit of a problem whenever you're going up against something like Desolation Row that gets Ghost Rock up to 4 Ghost Rock from running a job on Town Square.
Yeah, and they don't
on top of their regular production.
Oh yeah, so they tend to have a ton, and honestly, decks like Desolation Row decks tend to be the ones that I have the hardest time against. It's one of the toughest matchups for this deck, when they just don't really care that much about the deeds that are on the board. They put out such a consistent level of control and money, even if you can't stop them, and they tend to shoot really well too.
Well, I actually had a game against Desolation Road not too long ago that I pretty much let go on for too long, and Fred Ames Fred Ames wound up with just an impossible amount of influence. Silas Ames wound up with a disgustingly high bullet rating, and after a while they just start being worth control points, and it's just really hard to deal with. So
and it can be difficult because it's hard to, like, my normal goal in really powerful decks like that is to draw them out of Town Square, is to get them to different locations so that I can set up favorable shootouts. And Desolation Row decks don't tend to care.
Well, in the terms of shootouts, I'm looking at your draw structure, and it is 9s, 10s, and queens.
Yeah. And as we mentioned earlier, it's really strong, which has been really, really nice because people tend to see miracle decks or any decks that are sort of attachment focused and assume that it can't shoot out until its pieces are together, and that is not true with this deck.
Well, just to go over some of these cards really quickly, Bai Ying Chen, amazing shooter.
Oh, he's great.
I remember you pretty much parking him at my home and opposed my Maggie job over and over. See, Father
Diamond is just a backup blessed, but he has another really useful mobility kind of trick to him. And he's cheap and has no influence. He used to be in my starting posse, but I moved away from him.
Forster, a 4-cost 1 upkeep, 1 stud, 1 influence, and giving other people +1 bullets and +1 value. Not bad.
Yep. And now he has to be at a saloon or casino for that, which used to be easier because I had the Joker's Smile off of Old Howard. But I have ways in this deck to try and get to the same situation. And there's also a couple other saloons and casinos in the deck to make that easier. Wang Min Wu, he's really just he's a powerful little stud, but he's not. You don't use any of his abilities. He's just like a nice little 2-stud shooter with influence who costs 5 and is on value.
And it apparently is able to make the 2-stud gunslinger.
Yeah, but they go away before any shooting actually happens.
But they can be there for shootout actions and such.
Sure, it's a little weird, but he's there.
You told me about Doris.
Yep. He Fang and Master Shao are just sort of the best backup blesseds in the deck. They both cost 4 with 1 influence, and they are 1-stud shooters with influence and blessed. And the blessed ability. So I'm pretty much always happy just to get them in play.
We've talked about Henry Moran, a 1 Ghost Rock 2-draw dude.
You know, he's just a nice guy to have. I have a hard time. I mean, I don't need his illegal draw hand protection as much as some, but, you know, it's not bad to have.
Wait a minute. Who's this? This says Gabriel Pryor.
Worst card in the deck. No, I'm just kidding. I love Gabe. Now, if I'm being honest, I don't really use Gabe's ability in this deck because, as I mentioned, this deck doesn't fail pulls. But he is on value on Queen. He is another blessed, and he has a good amount of influence, and I have definitely had him out and used him a couple of times. And I feel like I'm contractually obligated to run Gabe in my deck. Especially when he's on value. Like, I have no excuse.
Like Gabriel Pryor being one of my favorite characters from the original Wild Cards campaign.
Thank you very much.
Which is I don't know if it's really saying much because my other favorite characters from the campaign were Rosaline Byrne, Hal Milton, and James Bogue.
Hey, it was a good group. It was a good set of characters.
Oh, y'all have really good chemistry as well. So y'all play.
It's fun stuff.
Play like It's like, you play games good.
Yeah. Well, we like him. So Tayari is a great. He's another low cost, he costs very little to put into the deck, and he's a stud maker, which is really nice. He basically just means you can turn a bit of your Ghost Rock into stud, and there's a lot of 0 bullet dudes to just pay 1 Ghost Rock and make Tayari turn him into a stud. I always like getting him out. Well, he's really powerful and really nice.
The thing is that you can, even on a 0 bullet dude, you pay 1 Ghost Rock and make the dude a stud. That dude doesn't have to be your shooter, but still contributes a stud bonus to your draw hand.
Oh, absolutely. It's huge. It makes a very big difference. Tao Chi Chow is the haymaker of the deck. Tao comes down, and I don't know if you've seen him go off in action, but his ability is tremendously powerful. And often you end up playing him for 4 or 5 Ghost Rock, which is just very reasonable for a 3-stud, 3-influence dude. He shoots out great. He can also boot to, if I'm worried you're going to use your deed, I can boot to send Tao Chi Chow over to it, take control because, I've got 3 influence there. Then just boot that deed to unboot Tao Chi Chow and do it again. You can use him to sort of machine gun go and boot down every deed.
I could just picture him going down the street, flipping all the clothes signs over.
That's exactly what it is. He's just in charge. He's huge. He's off value, but he's absolutely worth it. There's very few games where you play him out and it's not just an enormous swing in your favor. I remember I was playing physically with Carter.
Yeah.
And I was playing against JCC, actually, and he was watching, and he goes, "Oh, well, this game's pretty close." And then I played Tao Chi Chow, and he goes, "All right, well, I think you actually lose now." No, it's too much control.
Oh, too much control. At any rate, going on to the clubs, Curse of Failure. If you're not running 7s, this is probably your best, because it's 9s, and 9s are on value for you. This is probably your best force fight card.
It's on value. It's a nice little force fight card. I've got 2 of them in the deck, and I've toyed with going down to just 1, because if you really need it, you can cycle it back into the deck with House of Many Faiths, but it's sort of something you just never want to be without in your deck. I don't use it a ton, but it's still just really useful to have, because especially if you're pulling people out of position, if someone goes and tries to sit on your out of town deeds, or just try and mess up your plan, having a Curse of Failure to keep them on their toes is just really important.
Or
Ricochet.
Hold on, going back to that is let's see. They loses all keywords, traits, and abilities. These bullets, influence, and control points are equal to 0 and cannot be modified. Gets +1 upkeep. They cannot be discarded by card effects.
It does a lot. If it works, it basically just gets rid of the dude.
Ricochet. But back to Ricochet. This is a card.
Ricochet has almost on its own 1-me games. In fact, it has absolutely on its own 1-me games. My quarterfinal match with Doomdog in the Ranger game, Ricochet won it for me because he cheated on a really important late fight, and Ricochet just wrecked his shooter.
Even if you are losing the shootout and they play a cheat and draw hand, they lose their shooter, and you don't take casualties, and you draw a card.
Yeah, I always feel great when I have Ricochet in my hand.
If your hand is legal, you don't take casualties and draw a card. So.
Right. But it's amazing. It's absolutely worth it. Well, now, moving forward
I was about to say, let's skip Unprepared, because everyone knows Unprepared. Some people loathe Unprepared, but...
They certainly do. It's a great card, and I just can't... I mean, it's super powerful. I get why there's hate for it, but... Oh, boy. It's really important. Now, the only reason I would not run... normally, I'd run 4 Unprepared, probably. It's that good. But luckily, with House of Many Faiths, you can cycle it into the deck, which makes it feel like you have more Unprepareds than you actually do. And I have Moving Forward as a one-of. And this was actually Zachary Selden, who plays in a lot of the physical tournaments and stuff. He made this suggestion to me when I was talking about the deck because he ran a House of Many Faiths deck at the Ranger tournament last year.
I can see where you're going with this because looking at the list, I can already see 2 deeds that you really and truly want on the table. The Joker Smile being one of them, the other one being the Whately Estate.
Exactly. So in lowball, if you get this in your hand and they cheat in lowball, which is probably the most common occurrence of cheating, there are 3 deeds that you can pull out of the deck that have 0 production initially that are just like you get a free deed. You get the Joker's Smile, which is usually my first target, the Whately Estate, which is enormously powerful. And there have been times where...
That's free 2 control points.
Exactly. There have been times, like I've had games where they cheated in a shootout, and instead of using Ricochet or something, I realized it was more important to get 2 control points on the board and put them in check and just run home. And the Epidemic Laboratory, which is sort of the backup to all of it, but Epidemic Laboratory is a great win condition. You play it on the board for 0 and then run the job, which, by the way, you can run the Epidemic Laboratory job and unboot the Blessed with House of Many Faiths, so it costs you very little, and then you're getting actual production out of the entire thing. So moving forward has a bunch of great targets. If you use it in shootout, which you normally are going to want to use something a little better in a shootout, like that really will punish them, but if you do use it in a shootout, you could, like I've done it before where I've used it to get Carter's Bounties, and then used Carter's Bounties to bring in a dude who was kicked out of the shootout, or just bring in reinforcements for stuff. It's pretty versatile. And I don't know if it's a great...
It's like a much better recruitment drive.
Yes, and I had recruitment drive in this deck for a while, and I never used it. It was too costly. It was too easy for people to oppose.
I mean, it does half of what recruitment drive does, much better, much faster, much cheaper.
Absolutely. It's great. I love moving forward.
It's not what you know.
I have been on and off about this card for a while because it costs 2, which makes it one of the most expensive actions in the deck. But playing without it for a little while, I just think it is too good to ever take out of a deck. Like, if you're on Queens, this is just, it's great. The resolution of lower players' draw hand by 1 rank doesn't seem like it's all that powerful, but the number of times where you are shooting out against another deck and you both pull a legal full house, and this suddenly turns into you don't take a casualty and they do, it's big. And if you win by just 2, then it turns it into 3. That's that whole extra dude off of the board.
Yep. And then if they're cheating, look out.
Oh yeah. If they cheat, it's great. If they end up cheating in lowball and you're losing lowball, you can also use it to lower your hand by 4, which is often enough to make the difference.
Yeah, because it's not limited to your opponent's draw hand.
And obviously, I mean, you're going to have to pay 2 Ghost Rock to fire it off, but if you win lowball because of it, you make that 2 Ghost Rock back, you pretty much break even, and then, winning lowball just to have the first shootout action is super important.
Twilight is upon us. I have to say, I love this card. I love
it too.
I'm actually building. I built a Queen's 10s. I can't remember what the third value was, but Queens and 10s Sloan Hookster deck. And this card, I love it. This is like all shooters have +2 bullets while in a posse with a skilled dude. All your dudes are skilled.
It's really powerful.
Like your posse's always going to have a skilled dude in it, and your skilled dude joins your posse, so you are able to meet the first requirement with the second line of the card.
Which in this deck, so because I run Walk the Path, I've had times before where I've started a shootout with just 1 draw dude to like draw in a lot of their guys, just being like, screw it, there's no downside. We'll just kill this draw. And then I've used Twilight is Upon Us to bring in a Blessed who has 1 or 2 Walk the Path on them to bring in 2 other dudes who all come into this shootout unbooted, get a bonus to their draw, to their bullets, and just completely turn the tide on things. That being said, I only have it as a 1-of in the deck for a couple reasons.
Well,
one is it costs money to do.
And you can always shuffle it back in with House of Many Faiths.
Exactly. So in the matchups where you really need it, you can make sure that you get it a little more often. Yeah. But the problem is there are a lot of spell decks out there. And if you are up against a Mad Science deck or a a hex deck or another miracle deck, it gives them +2 bullets too.
Mm-hmm.
And that really mitigates the upside to it. Now, being able to bring a dude in can still be worth it. And a lot of times, if, you know...
well, being able to cycle this out of your hand in case it happens to be a dead card.
Yeah.
With the House of Many Faiths. That can work out pretty well, too.
That's what makes it not that much of a downside to, like, have it in the deck. And it's actually a big plus to having, like, a couple utility cards in the deck, which I'm looking into kind of adding a couple more.
Well, looking at the deeds, the first thing I want to talk about is the purpose of the Joker Smile and the Whately Estate. And
I mean, the number one purpose of them is
the Jokers back in the deck.
Keep Jokers in the deck all the time. And it's better in this deck than most decks. Like, a lot of decks use Whately and Joker Smile, put Jokers back into your discard pile. But with House of Many Faiths, you put them in the discard pile, and then you get them directly back into the deck.
Yeah, I know. It's like the Joker Smile, controller noon boot, discard a Joker, gain 1 Ghost Rock, and draw a card. Well, House of Many Faiths, then you grab that Joker and put it right back in the deck.
It is amazing. If you can start out,
I'm smiling.
If you get Joker Smile, like, if you can get Joker Smile early on, this is why I used to run it with old Howard, you can get to the point where you just always have a full set of Jokers in your deck. And when you get down to the point where you have only 15 cards sitting in your deck and most of them are your discard, and you know that 2 of them are Jokers, you can go into pretty much any shootout confident that there's almost no way that you end up cheating or losing, which is really powerful.
And the Whately Estate. Now, the good thing is, like, some really good things about the Whately Estate. 1, it's king, so it's always going to pass your spell pool.
Yep.
2, your opponent's dudes have to boot to move here, even if they're adjacent.
Yep.
It's private, so if they start something here, they're going to get bounties on them, and you actually can move Jokers from your boot hill back into your discard pile and then put them back in the deck with House of Many Faiths.
Well, and even if they have, like, some sort of trick, like, you know horses better than I do. I think it's Mustang that just lets you move a dude.
Yeah.
If they have a Mustang and they take it to the Whately Estate, normally that would have it unbooted.
They still have to boot.
They have to do it. There's no choice. So it's really hard for them to control. If they move dudes there, it's easy to, like,
you don't want to go there, but that place is spooky.
Yeah, then they're a fish in a barrel. You move your people over there, you have time to set up exactly the posse you want, and you get to take them out. So it's very nice.
I have to recommend that you look into the story of everything that happened at the Whately Estate in the original card game because, oh boy.
Oh, I definitely will.
Massive battle. One of the most massive battles of the original card game happened there that involved both the agency and the Texas Rangers working together.
Nice.
And the previous version of the Eagle Wardens, their big spellcaster dude going into a spellcasting battle with the big spellcasting dude from the Whateleys.
Sounds awesome.
All the meanwhile, a Manitou has manifested physically in the real world and is pretty much leveling the north end of town. It's awesome.
I had Nicodemus Whately in this deck for a little while, to have kind of the similar Doris Powell effect of just being something you could play and
get some
kind
control
of
points.
Get a bunch of control points. But I think Doris just did the job a little better in this deck.
Now some of these other deeds. I mean, it's like I see the general store. Goods or spell reduce the Ghost Rock cost of the card by 2. On value, auto include as far as I'm concerned.
Yep, really good.
Let's see. Some of these I don't know.
So
very well.
all of the cards in all of the deeds have a purpose in the deck. And that took a little while to get to that point because it's sort of the nature of Doomtown that sometimes you have cards that are like the important thing here is that they're on value. But Epidemic Laboratory helps work towards a win condition because that has an unbounded control point ability. Explorer's Lodge is a casino and a saloon, which synergizes really well with Walters Creek Distillery and Forster Cook, and also can just be another way to unboot dudes because it can send dudes to Town Square unbooted. Old Marge's Manor.
A cheap control point, and you can actually it's sort of an economy boost whenever you're paying for something like It's Not What You Know.
Yep, and there's been a lot of times where it's been the difference between being able to cast It's Not What You Know or Twilight is Upon Us, and I've used it. Baird's is just an amazing way to get out more deeds. It's on value. There's no downside to it, except sometimes others can use it. Carter's Bounties.
Yep.
This is probably the one that's most synergistic with the plan of the deck.
Yeah,
because
moving people places.
yeah, and especially being able to basically commit very few people to a shootout and then increase your commitment if it looks like a favorable situation is something that you want to do a lot. Jonah's Retreat, I actually took out Pat's Perch, which was off value, and put in Jonah's Retreat as like kind of doing the same thing.
Well, if anybody wants to move one of their dudes out of town and keep them there for extra 2 Ghost Rock a turn, I'm sitting here going like, yeah, sure, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Get out of town. Go out there.
That's exactly how I feel. It does a really good job drawing people out, useful people away from the opponent. And then I tend to be a little better at the number of times that they've like sent someone out to Jonah's Retreat, and then I've cooked someone out there. I've used Asakichi Cook to send somebody out there unbooted, call them out, shoot them with very little resistance, and then just boot that guy home or use House of Many Faiths. It happens all the time. Walters Creek Distillery. I mean, it's fine just for 3/1/1, but its ability is backbreakingly good.
Does it work with the Joker's Smile? Come on.
It works with Joker's Smile. It works with, I think it works with Explorer's Lodge.
And Cliffs.
Cliffs.
Which is just another 2 cost. Oh, your dude to this location or adjacent location you control becomes a stud. That's really good.
Cliffs is fantastic.
2 1/1. That's amazing.
If you can get Cliffs down as one of your first deeds and turn Zhao Dan into a stud every day, he becomes a real powerhouse.
We got Silent Sigil. The number of cards you can discard at sundown is reduced by 1.
But after you refill your hand during sundown, you draw a card.
So you can't discard, but you get an extra card.
Yep, and it's generally worth it. If I'm being entirely honest, I think Silent Sigil is useful in the deck, but it's a little overkill. Like, I already have so many ways to discard cards. I would consider cutting Silent Sigil if something else was good in there. But if you can get together a 7-card hand, you are really powerful.
Yeah.
Now, High Stakes Haven, this one is off value, but it's just such a good economy piece that...
Well, I was looking at this and like it's sort of like running Blake Ranch. It's the same profile without the control point.
Yep.
But the thing is that okay, I'm going to move out of town and get that control point, but I'm not going to get the production. And then whenever with me controlling it, I reveal an illegal draw hand. I either have to pay a Ghost Rock or discard a card at random from my play hand. Why would I want to go control that?
Huge. It's so much better for me than for the opponent. One, I have 6 cards in my draw hand most of the time. I mean, in my hand most of the time. So if I lose one, I'm just even with the other person. It's such a huge economy boost. And exactly what you said. If they control it, it's like almost all upside for me. Like, one control point isn't that hard to deal with most of the time.
I would only ever... It's like, if I were playing against this, I would only ever think about moving to High Stakes Haven. Only if it
to win the game,
I win the game that nightfall.
Yeah.
All right, now down to the hearts. Consecration.
Oh, yeah. So Consecration is... Consecration is... It's not the most popular miracle, but I think I've been seeing it played around a little bit more. So it is on-board cheating. Mm-hmm. Which
and doesn't
basically
boot.
Sorry?
It doesn't boot.
No, it doesn't. And that's like its weird little side thing, which makes it really good with someone like Padre Ernesto, who can boot a miracle to do things. And Consecration is also mugging proof, which is really nice. Because mugging, will boot all the attachments on a dude and then runs a job on them.
And you can still use the cheating resolution miracle, even though it's booted. So
now, Consecration is also I tend to use Consecration more in lowball than I do in actual shootouts.
Yeah, it sets you up. It sets you up very, very well. You get a very big bullet, big influence dude. They become a stud.
2 influence, 2 extra bullets, and a stud turns Zhao Dan into a hammer. It makes Stevie like a real player on the board, and if you use it on someone who already I've used it on Wang Min Wu before, and just gotten him up to a 4 stud with 3 influence who just wrecks.
Yeah, and if it happens to be a shootout, you reduce your casualties by this round by 3. So
yeah,
like nobody's dying.
No, it's also very nice. That it has saved me multiple times. Now, Scattergun is kind of a new addition to the deck.
That is a meta choice. If I'm just talking about it, I can already tell you.
It's been a great meta choice.
Oh,
I've gotten so much value out of Scattergun. Everybody's running Pedros. Everybody is running.
This is the donkey shooter.
Yeah, it's a donkey shooter. I see Pedros all over the place. I mean, Spirit decks. A lot of them. Yeah. Pedro's nuts. But Spirit decks with the sidekick ones are really good. Cavalry Escort is a sidekick, and that's used in calling the cavalry decks.
This is actually useful against a new card that's going to be coming out in Welcome to Deadwood. I think I've actually got a picture of this card. We can talk about it after we're done talking about the deck.
Oh, I would love to do that.
Oh yeah.
Always like new cards. And then, its second ability in decks which don't have any sidekicks, its second ability is usually relevant. Often it will just take one draw or one stud out of the opponent's posse, but it's pretty nice. And even worst case scenario, it still is given a dude +1 bullet.
Oh yeah.
Which
on top of being buffed by Consecration, the right dude can become a 5 stud.
Absolutely. It could be huge. And I mean, even just normally if on day 1 I get a Scattergun, I'll just put it on Zhao Dan Li, and then with Zhao Dan Li, the Tombstone Haint, and Shilong Pang, I can put together a 7 switch 3 posse, no problem. And that's getting to a pretty consistent shooting pace for this. So the next really key miracle here is Walk the Path. And this just goes with the movement theme that I was talking about earlier. It's great in a shootout just to pull people in, but it's also just nice to be able to, boot dudes out to places, get the value there, and then just pull them home nice and safe.
And your other 10 of Heart Miracle is Guiding Light. Now let's talk about this one because you explained Walk the Path really well.
Guiding Light is way more situational. And there's a reason that I only have 1 of. And partially it was just because with Grim in the deck, having 4 of Walk the Path didn't make a lot of sense to me. Because I always want 1 or 2 Walk the Paths on the board, but I never want a bunch of them. And they become way too expensive with Grim, because every time you cast a miracle that's already on the board, it costs 1 extra.
Yeah.
So Guiding Light was kind of like a nice other on-value one that still sort of works with the ability of the deck. So it has 2 modes. One is that you pay another player 1 Ghost Rock to send your dude at this or an adjacent location home. If you have less Ghost Rock than that player, unboot that dude. And the second one...
So actually, this can actually move a booted dude home before he gets called out.
Yep. And that's what I use it for 90% of the time. The 1 Ghost Rock is usually pretty usable. It often unboots the dude because this deck tends to go pretty light on economy and spin pretty heavily. So I get the unboot most of the time that I use it. And then the other ability on Guiding Light is basically 2 Ghost Rock to send one of their dudes home. To send one of their dudes at this or an adjacent location home, which I've almost never used.
And it doesn't
it can be
them.
Useful. Yeah, it doesn't boot them, which makes it a little less ideal. But if they have booted a dude to control one of your locations, it can get them off of it, which can be really useful since, booted dudes for opposing decks are way bigger of a cost than booted dudes for my deck. So, it's a big plus.
Well, we've got a table ready.
Yes.
In Octagon. So let's do a little bit of the maybe a day or two here in Gamora and talk and just kind of see what happens.
Let's do it. Let's see. Is there a way I can just reveal my hand to you? I guess we could just show hands.
I don't know how.
Oh, okay. I can just click on it and do visibility. Everybody. Boom, you can see my hand.
There we go. Now, so I'm seeing in your hand you have the Amazing Grace, which I'm guessing is probably going to go on Stevie immediately.
So I actually normally like to put my first miracle on Shilong Pang just because I like having him hop around town, and I find Stevie is a little easier to kind of use Grim on and get value out of that. But it could really go on either of them. Yeah. So let's okay, yeah. This starting hand, I've got moving forward in my starting hand, which means that if my opponent cheats first time, it's a really good situation. I do have a Joker in hand, but that doesn't really matter in this deck. I'm going to use House of Many Faiths just to like cycle it back in. It's really good.
See. Let's do low ball real quick and see what.
Let's
see
do
who gets
it.
to go first here. So you at least you have enough Ghost Rock to play low ball.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
that's all I got. So the deck always starts with either 3 or 5 Ghost Rock, depending on if it wins the low ball.
Has it? Oh, I bet this always happens to me.
There we go. Oh, I cheated. That's not fair. Well, I mean, it's playing against my own deck, so.
Well, hold on. Let me read moving forward. Yep, you can I think you can actually play that on yourself.
I don't think so. I don't know if you can.
All it says is cheat and resolution. Search your deck and discard pile for an in-town deed and play it.
I still think that it needs to be used on the opponent's hand.
Well, I'm lucky enough that I lose a Joker in my low ball hand. So now I'm like, I need either the Waitley Estate or the Joker's Smile.
Yeah, you definitely want to get it back into the deck. So okay, this deck loses low ball a lot, which is usually fine because there's just not a lot of like price in doing stuff. But yeah, as you can see, like as long as I have Amazing Grace to like kind of get things going, the plan is probably to put out Amazing Grace, to use Grim to search up maybe another Miracle if I can hit one, and then start getting Curse of Failure and this Joker back into the deck. Maybe Father Diamond too, because you don't really need another Blessed this early in the game.
Now in my hand,
unless you really have to Ghost Rock.
Now in my hand, I've got some deeds here and some miracles, but I always forget to do upkeep.
Oh yeah, I actually forget that all the time too.
Like why? Okay, there we go. So, when do you normally try to use Grim? Is it kind of like the Maggie Harris job thing where you want to do it first thing day one?
I use Grim pretty aggressively early on because I just like to get some miracles out. Like my ideal would be to get out. Amazing Grace is not super key early, just because it's a really powerful card, but you don't tend to need the influence immediately day one. You don't need to be tricking around. But I really like to try and get a consecration and a walk the path out as soon as possible.
Oh no, I whiffed.
It happens. It's not that big of a cost, though, and that's why I tend to do it on Stevie the first day. Because that's just how it happens. So, this started out with mine. I'll probably do the same thing. I've been doing Grim manually, too, because it's a little weird in Octagon.
I managed to do pretty well there, I think.
Yeah, it doesn't reveal the cards, which is what it's supposed to do, though, which is matters to some people.
We'll let someone know. They probably already know.
I'll tell them. And for a while, it was attaching cards upside down when it actually did it. So as you can see here, I did it, and I got Guiding Light. So I'll just shuffle these back into my deck.
Oh my, Stranger Things.
And then, it's just like a nice extra miracle on the board.
So that will attach
to start things off.
Yeah. And now I happen to have a consecration in my hand, but now I can't attach it to Stevie because he's booted.
Yep.
So
good one to have on Xilong Pang too, though.
So, yeah, that's what I want. That's what I will do.
And then I tend to just like to kind of get out my miracles quick. Spend the first day just kind of clearing the hand out. You definitely can shoot, especially if you have a like you have. You've got an Unprepared in your hand on the first day and a Ricochet, which can be a really powerful first day.
Yeah.
But also another fun trick. If you had wanted to put Consecration on Stevie, you could have played General Store first and then use General Store to attach.
Well, it says as shopping. And I think that one of the stipulations as shopping means that the dude has to be unbooted in a place in a location you control.
I think it gets around that, but I'm not entirely sure. I was under the impression it did.
That'll just be something to look up later. But
Yeah, we can
anyway,
look into it.
I'll play the general store. Back to you.
Okay. Then I will use House of Many Faiths ability on Stevie Linden to shuffle my Joker back into the deck. I'll shuffle Bai Yang Chen back into the deck from the discard. I'll just get him to town square with an extra influence.
Well, I think I'm going to do the same thing, except with. Now, a question. It's like, choose your dude with a miracle. So he doesn't. That's fine. Okay, cool. I answered my own question. Use card ability. I'm going to shuffle that. And Master Show. Show.
I know he's Soup Shao, but I'm not an authority.
Neither am I. Oh, excuse me. And so, yeah. So you have the guiding light. So you can pretty much could pay, technically, to send Shi Long Ping back home.
I could. It wouldn't really be worth it since he's already up.
Yeah.
But it's definitely an option. So it's weird. It's always weird playing against your own deck because you're like, oh, it has all the same strengths my deck has.
Well, this is more of like a learning experience for me. It's like, okay, now I'm actually getting some hands-on experience with this. I think.
So, since I'm in the situation where I don't have any day one deeds, that's when it's really important to just like have what you have.
Yeah.
To have your full upkeep, coming in and still clear out everything that's in your hand. So I would probably, honestly, the in-state here is probably just Stevie Linden going back home and waiting out the day. But just to sort of try and, get you out of position, I'll probably move him to General Store and make you chase.
Right.
Now, the downside of this is if they do have a kidnapping or something, it could end up going badly. But still. It stops you from using it if you had anything. If I had a goods, it could be worthwhile.
I'm actually going to use Asakichi's ability to discard.
See, that's the tough part of the game sometimes. You're like, oh, do I want to lose my Ricochet? Which you actually, you can definitely afford to lose Ricochet when you got a Consecration out on the board.
Right.
Which is
I want to move Randall to the General Store using Asakichi's ability. That way I don't actually have to spend a movement on, moving him.
Yeah, exactly. So I would probably, at this point, just...
So you have Amazing Grace, so you could actually cast that and actually bump him up to two.
Yeah, which would definitely take the place over if I had a place I needed to do it. And actually, no, it wouldn't take the place over. It would just make him even.
Yeah.
Because Randall's got 2.
Mm.
But I guess my priority really right now, because I don't think I would want to shoot out this turn, would really just be to try and get cards out of my hand that I don't want. So it could potentially make sense to Curse of Failure Randall, but since we'd be pretty much evenly faced, I don't think that's something I'd really want to do.
Well, I mean, let's do it, and we can sort of see how a shootout might go with this deck.
Sure.
So you curse of Failure Randall.
Yeah, and I think what I would probably normally do is just try and dump Father Diamond, maybe dump Curse of Failure, use Cook's ability, just send somebody to town square and move them home booted. But let's just shoot out for the fun of it, right?
Yeah.
So
we have a spoiler to talk about.
Oh yeah. With Curse of Failure, I would probably bring in most of this gang and have Let's have Shilong Pang run it.
Okay.
Now, honestly, I probably wouldn't do a shootout now, but
Yeah.
you could still. This will show how the deck can shoot a little bit at this point. So, Randall's being called out.
Well, he will accept.
Mm-hmm.
And because I don't want anything bad to happen to Randall. Randall's a nice guy.
Oh yeah, he's great.
But his buddies are going to come and help him out.
Sounds good to me.
I'm doing this the slow way, I'm sure.
You just double click the dudes and they'll join.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's super nice.
I'm still learning Octagon. So.
Oh, I definitely am. I discover new stuff all the time. It's a complicated little system.
So. Anyway, so with me being the winner, I get the first shootout play.
Yep.
So I will. I'll go ahead and target Shilong Pang with unprepared. Come on, there we go.
All right, so that knocks out his Amazing Grace. And he cannot use that ability. And then I will just pass on shootout plays because I ain't got nothing to do.
So
if I had walked the path, I could always choose to, pull in Randall or Cook if I wanted that extra.
With like you were saying earlier, early on, Xiao Dan Li is going to be your shooter.
Yeah.
So I've got a total of 5, 6, 7, and 2.
Mm-hmm. And then I have also 7 and 2. Because Xiao Dan's the shooter, 1 stud from Tombstone, Haint, and Shilong Pang, and 1 extra draw from Stevie Linden. So 7 and 2. 7 and 2 is 7 and 2 or 7 and 3 is like sort of what I tend to try and put together in my first shootouts here. So
my horses tend to have 8 and 1 or 8 and 2 most of the time.
Which is pretty comparable most of the time. Obviously, 8's a little better, but if you can get at least a couple things to look at, if you have a strong draw structure, you can get a lot out of just 7. All right. I will reveal my hand.
And we tie.
Yep, and we both managed to pull out a legal full house, which is pretty par for the course for this deck. So like it tends to be able to pull full houses pretty consistently.
Are they most of the time legal?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely can cheat sometimes because it has a big thing to it, but it just has enough options that I'm not usually forced to cheat if I don't want to.
Now, at this point, if this were actually a shootout that you wanted to happen, because
right.
most of the time you would want to set up more than this, and now we're having to take casualties.
Sure.
Who's usually the first to go?
So normally, even though he is kind of my early shooter, I still tend to discard Xiao Dan Li as the first loss. I mean, he doesn't cost you that much. It is a little. I prefer to ace him over discarding him because he fails pulls. But in a situation like this,
right.
If he's got to go, he's got to go.
Okay. Well, I think that's cool.
And then I would probably in this situation run.
Yeah.
Just because now you have cheat and protection. I have only moving forward as cheat and protection, which isn't very good. And I can only put together a 7 switch nothing, which is a little worse. It's significantly worse. And a lot of times, just like drawing people into... Now, obviously, this is a mirror match, so it's a little bit different. But a lot of times, drawing people into...
well, yeah, because now like, the thing is that 3 of my dudes are booted. one of which has influence. Randall and Asakichi are the only two that can move.
Yep. And if I hadn't already used Have So Many Faiths, I could use Shilong Pang to I could
go back to Town Square
him with that.
Unboot, yeah.
I could still use Guiding Light to unboot Shilong Pang if I had something else I needed to control or do something like that. I probably wouldn't right now, but that kind of shows you how that can go.
Well, I think that'll be enough for now.
Yeah.
I will go ahead and say that this deck kind of wrecked me is like in our game, which whatever. I was having more fun actually chatting with you than playing the game. But speaking of chatting, go ahead.
I was just going to say this deck has gone through a couple iterations, and I really think its power level has spiked a lot.
Yeah. Now,
with some couple changes.
Moving forward, especially with the success that this thing is having in the Ranger event.
Mm-hmm.
After that, what would you think would be the first thing that you would adjust?
So the one thing I kind of want to have in the deck, and the problem is that this always comes with loosening your structure a little bit, is I'd like to have one or two utility miracles. So I'm considering, because the deck has trouble with cards like Stun in Your Eyes and Pin Down that like reduce bullets, because a lot of times if you only have one guy who is your real shooter, and that can be difficult. Sun in Your Eyes, when if you're losing all your stud, it can be difficult. So I'm thinking about potentially putting in a single copy of Onward Christian Soldiers, which can up the bullets of everyone in the posse, stop anyone from having their bullets lowered or turn to draws, just as if I continue to see Sun in Your Eyes played a lot. Mm-hmm. I'm also considering potentially having Censure in there as another little bit of onboard cheating punishment that can also help you win low ball potentially and send like one big, huge stud dude in the opposing posse home, booted, which can be a really difficult situation to get out of. If they have like a 4 or 5 stud and you're hoping to win by attrition, throwing ties, it can be really difficult as your draw gets worse every turn and they just keep, having their big stud who's almost everything that they're doing. And then finally, Shield of Faith is another one that I'm trying to potentially slot in there, which stops the dudes from being aced or discarded, except by, I think, cheating punishment or cheating reacts, or as the whatchamacallem, as the casualties taken at the end of the round. And that helps just against like point blank decks can be really powerful against this deck because there's a lot of 0 bullet dudes. And I think that the combination of Onward Christian Soldiers and Shield of Faith might help just shore up that weakness a little bit. And even though it's not as powerful as like a Telerio's deck, which can just like pull all of the off-value miracles out of the deck and onto the board really quick, Have So Many Faiths still does a pretty good job with Grim of getting them out there. So that's the biggest thing that I've been thinking about changing.
And we've got a new set coming too in November.
Oh yeah. Hopefully it'll give some fun new pieces.
Well, I mean, I've already seen at least one card that I want to try in the horse deck to replace Henry Moran, which is that new Mad Science Grifter.
Oh yeah, he looks fun.
I've seen like the pre-cut sheet for, and I know that there's another horse coming, but I can't remember what it is. But David Lapp actually gave me a card to spoil. Oh boy, that I like to hear. So I will pop back to looking at your screen instead of my Octagon screen. Right. I think is it ready? It is not. Yes, it is. There it is. And here we go. Feathered Friend.
Oh, boy. I don't see it yet. Can we bring it up on the...
Actually, hold on. I'll tell you what I'll do. Let me just send you a copy.
That'll do as well. That will also do.
In Discord here. My stream is still running for you. Oh, look, there's all my music I'm working on.
I think it's just sharing the specific DTDB window because I'm not seeing anything other than that one.
Well, actually, wait a minute.
No
It's
worries
up.
about
It's
that.
actually up on. Pardon our technical difficulties. Let me figure out where Doomtown database is. Nope. I could think I can do this.
Oh, I found it. Nice. Yeah, it's up if you search the cards on Doomtown DB.
Yep, there it is. I'm going to
Nice.
switch to my big version here. Yeah, Feathered Friend. It's an Ace of Hearts goods card. And just going down the list. Number 1, I love this art.
Oh yeah, this is great. The style is so neat. The like more pastel kind of feel of everything,
Look,
like color wise.
I am wondering if this may be a picture taken from one of the older Doomtown classic role-playing game books.
I bet that. I mean, that's such a great like source of cool art for stuff. I mean, obviously some of it needs to be a little updated for modern sensibilities and things like that. But this is a great one.
Well,
let's see.
I know that some of the art that's being used in Welcome to Deadwood is actually by probably my favorite artist from back in that day, Lawston Wallace.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but anyway, it looks like we got another sidekick.
Boy, you're just gonna make Scattergun that much better.
Go bird hunting now.
I like this one. This gives you a lot of information, which is like a pretty cool thing.
I was thinking about this, and in my horse deck, I run a dude, Nathan Shane, which he has a shootout ability that lets me like look at a number of cards in my opponent's hand equal to his bullet rating, and then I think I can make him discard one of those cards, or him or
nice.
her, them, I should say. And this sort of does almost the same thing, except with the extra sidekick keyword. This card can be discarded.
Something good, no matter what.
Yeah, this card can be discarded to cover a single casualty. It's what makes Pedro disgusting. Pedro being a zero-cost sidekick.
I mean, Pedro's nuts.
He's
nuts. Great.
He's like, I've heard that he's the unofficial mayor of Gamora.
Anyway, you have to vote Pedro.
First action, Noon Boot. Choose a dude at this location. Look at a random card in their controller's hand. So
I think even though like this is a random card, I think there are enough times where you're down to just 1 or 2 cards in like both opponents' hands this is
you're
really
pretty much
useful.
on the same page I am. It's like whenever your opponent is down to 3 cards, you have a 33% chance that you're going to get a look at, say, a cheating resolution or a key shootout action in their hand.
Yeah. And I mean, I like the fact that you can use it as a noon ability or a
shootout ability.
Yeah. Because you might want to look at their hand to like figure out what that card is before you decide if you're going to shoot out or not.
Yeah, and it's like, whoa, I don't have an answer for that. We're not going to start this fight. And then And then in the cases of a fight that you can't avoid, you still have the shootout ability and pretty much do the exact same thing. And in doing it during a shootout, you can, with maybe 2 or 3 cards in their play hand, you can hopefully get lucky enough to see if they kind of spot that cheating resolution and then go, okay, it's very likely they don't have a cheating resolution in their hand. I'm going to go ahead and cheat.
Or even if they do, if you find out they do have a cheating resolution, okay, don't cheat at any cost. If they have Ricochet, for instance, you can know, for the love of God, don't make my main guy my shooter. It's a lot of pretty important information. I also think, and this is something that has been like a pet thing of mine that I've been looking into building, which is a sidekick with a shootout ability on it could also potentially work with a card from the most recent set, the naming card of the most recent set, which is Hell's Coming With Me, because that lets somebody join your posse who has a sidekick. It brings someone in to join your posse.
Yeah.
And if they have a sidekick, then they can use a shootout ability on one of their attached cards. So sidekicks with shootout abilities are particularly good with that because it's the whole package right there. You could just bring them in with the sidekick on them and immediately use it without giving the other people a chance to use any of the cards in their hand.
Now, the ace value, it sort of might be the biggest downside on this card.
Yeah, I agree. That makes it tough for a lot of spellcasting decks, obviously.
And also pretty much it kind of forces your draw structure into those lower values.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're running this, you're probably going to be running some other cards. This might actually be all right in, say, a legendary holster deck.
Sure. Well, and also if you're building like a Dead Man's Hand deck or something like that, it's on the ace value, which is important because they're the aces, eights, and jacks, and it gets on the board and gets out of the deck and can protect your dudes. So any sidekicks on the ace value is good there.
Yeah, and talking about it, it's a 2 Ghost Rock cost, and I've noticed that in a lot of these legendary holster decks, or any deck that's actually running the Doomsday Supply, the Doomsday Supply can actually, as a nooner or shootout ability, grab a goods.
Yep.
And attach it, reducing the cost by 2, so your Doomsday Supply can grab this for free. And
attach it to a nice little freebie.
Attach it to one of your dudes in the middle of a shootout, and then you have a free sidekick that you can discard for a casualty later.
Yeah, really useful.
So it's really useful. But
I'll be interested to see how much play this will see. I mean, I think it's got a lot of utility. There's a lot of sidekicks that are kind of competing for the space, but I don't really know what else is on the ace value for that. So it'll be pretty neat.
It will be pretty neat. And as we were saying, this will actually give some sidekick protection for, say, the legendary holster decks that are out there, because you can't really run things like Pedro. Well, you can probably run Pedro anywhere.
Right, but you want those low pulls.
Right, or the cavalry escort. But there's also possibly a sidekick theme that you might be able to build around. I know that there's a First Peoples dude who sort of has a job similar to Maggie Harris, that you can actually either grab a horse or a sidekick and attach it to one of your dudes, reducing its cost by 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
And that dude's name escapes me so much right now, and I don't.
I don't want
to change Windows just to go look up this guy on Doomtown database. He's there. You can find him.
So the only other sidekick on Ace right now is Sun-Touched Raven, which is a spirit sidekick. So obviously that can only be attached to shamans. So I think that this feathered friend is going to really kind of open up sidekicks in that space. That'll be a nice little tool for decks that are running low value aces and stuff, just to protect their people all around.
Well, all in all, I'm looking forward to Welcome to Deadwood at the entire set.
Me too.
Just the complete thing, because one, I'm a huge fan of the actual history of that town.
Mm-hmm.
2, I'm a huge fan of the TV show, the HBO show.
Oh yeah, the HBO show is phenomenal.
And now that we're actually getting it, and the goings on in the Deadlands RPG universe, which, if you're just watching this video on a lark and you have no idea what we're talking about, this card game is set in the Deadlands RPG universe.
Yeah.
Which is produced by Pinnacle Entertainment Group.
And it's really fun. It's a great setting.
My favorite RPG setting. I know there are a lot of people who love the D&D, and I do too. But this, growing up,
but there's something about Deadlands that's just fantastic.
I grew up on westerns. So being raised by my grandparents, and then my grandfather sitting there watching John Wayne over and over and over again. So yeah, I'm just a huge fan of westerns, especially the spaghetti westerns. And so now that we're actually getting into Deadwood in the Doomtown card game, this is going to be cool.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a great set. I'm really excited. I've really liked all the Pine Box Entertainment sets. They've really brought a lot of cool new stuff to the game.
It's a really good example of fans keeping the game alive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think they're doing a great job. And it's I can't wait to see what happens with Wild Bill Hickok. Wait, he's dead, you say? It's like, oh no, he's not. I was like, oh, I don't know.
Well, and I mean Rosaline Burns in this next set too.
That's true. So we get another.
And she's great. She's a really
I
good
know.
card.
I'm wanting to use her in a new Sloan Huckster deck. I get hung up on these certain strategies, like Sloan
Oh yeah.
Hucksters. I'm hung up. It's like they're probably better. It's like Huckster's probably better out of Fearmongers, but I love Outlaw Hucksters.
Hey, it's a cool aesthetic to me. You know, the spell slinging outlaws. I love it. I totally get it.
Well, Jordan, thank you for joining me on this episode.
Thank you for having me.
I've had a tremendous amount of fun, and you're welcome to come back. Next time you have a new deck idea, let's talk about it.
Knowing me, I'll probably just tweak this deck for years going on. But I've been trying to branch out into other things. But yeah, I love Doomtown. The deck building discussions are great. It's a fun little community, and yeah, I enjoyed talking about it.
Speaking of community, there is a Doomtown Discord, which I will attempt to put in the video notes down in the thing below the video window description. That's what I'm looking for. If you're interested in joining us.
Yeah, we're all there. We're very active. It's very fun.
And there's just some really cool people in general there. Like you.
Very fun little supportive community. So if you come in and you're like, I don't know anything about how to play this game or how to build decks, everybody will be excited to help.
It's like the entire Discord server will go, we will help you. It's the helping all over again.
Yes, exactly, with better results.
But I believe that's it for today. Almost knocked my microphone over because I'm totally professional. But I think we're done here, don't you?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me again, and I'm looking forward to seeing some more episodes of this.
I'm looking forward to making more. I've got a very long list of people lined up to actually do this. But
oh boy.
Until the next episode, we will see you at the table.